Well, anybody that's just caught up with the latest Dune movie would know that that was Sardica for Art is the Way, and also a little dig at me for trying to paint Paul Atreides, their arch enemy, in an abstract style. Now, I'd better catch up. As you can see, I've already gone into fast mode with this sketch. I'm holding the pencil right at the end for nice, loose, languid strokes all over the stretch canvas here. Now, these first preliminary sketches aren't there for absolute accuracy. They're just pretty much a roadmap. Here I'm going to start on my background. Now, if you've been watching any of my previous videos or been following along for a while, you know that I'm a big fan of painting in my backgrounds first, which kind of gives you a 3D effect, and it makes your subject look like it's pushed forward from the background as opposed to part of that background. And it makes it so much easier if you're painting hair or fur, as you can really layer over the top of that background, and again pushes that subject forward and gives you that 3D effect. Now again, you will see me tweak the background quite often throughout this painting, and here I'm going to start to add a little bit of dark blue, some turquoise, again with some lighter highlights with white, and I'm just going to keep playing with that background. And I'm also going to paint my edges that way I can just put a hanger straight on the back and hang it straight on my wall after it's been varnished. And here I'm going to start painting the hair in loosely with a 15 or 12 mil brush. It's just a flat brush, and I'm just going to start making some broad strokes. And I'm also making quite a few decisions here in my head as I'm watching it unfold in front of me. I'm wondering, do I bring the hairline down? Do I go exactly by my reference photo? And a lot of the times I'll try to break away from the reference photo just so that it gives me my own personal take on that particular painting. See how I'm twisting and twirling the brush? Here I'm using the edge of the brush, then I'm going back out to broad strokes and flattening the brush out, allowing me to cover large areas while I'm still in this blocking in stage. Here I'm starting to play around with some colours. I've got some dark blue, I've got white to add into that dark brown to give some highlights, and I'm really just feeling my way at this stage. And now I've cleaned off my saucer, I've added some yellow ochre, and I'm going to use that pretty much for all of the face as an underglaze. And for coverage, I'm using a 10mm flat brush, and I will switch out between brushes as I'm going along. And I can see there that I've added some white to my saucer or my little palette, and even though I'm still in the blocking in stage, I'm now starting to play around with my darker and lighter values. And the great thing about it being an abstract, or a figurative abstract in this case, is that I don't want to be too spot on with my blending. I'm able to keep those whites nice and bold against those darker backgrounds. And I can see there that I've managed to pick up a little burnt umber on my brush, and it's actually worked out quite well. It's one of them happy mistakes where it's given me a really good detail of my jawline. Now that I've got a fair bit of the blocking in stage out the way, I'm going to start to add some details, and I'm starting off with the eyebrows. It's got nice big thick eyebrows. I'm using some burnt umber, although I would like to use raw umber normally, but unfortunately I don't have that in this little pack while I'm away from home, so I'm going to be using that throughout this painting. Now again, see, I've got a little 10mm brush, or it might be an 8mm brush actually, and see how I'm using the flat side. Now for the under eye line there, I'm just going to use the edge of the brush, and you'll get those skills the more you practice. Now, as I'm picking up a little bit more colour on my brush, you'll see here I'm just trying to get that eye line in the right direction. So you'll see me cross-reference quite often between the two eyes, the edge of the eye down to the edge of the mouth line, and again I'm tweaking now the background and the hair. And as I said, you'll see me do that throughout this painting. Throughout this whole painting, I was never happy with that background, and in the end, you'll see towards the end of the whole video, I even resort to finger painting. But here I'm starting on his still suit. I've just mixed a little bit of that lamp black in with that burnt sienna. Why do I keep saying sienna? Not burnt sienna, sorry, it's burnt umber. And if I do happen to have any Dune fans watching this, please let me know. Is this his still suit or is it just a space suit? I'm not 100% sure. So please feel free to correct me in the comments. I'm always happy to learn new things with this sort of genre. And again, I don't know if that's a 12mm or a 15mm brush. I'm going to have to sit down and measure these brushes properly. But as you can see, I'm again switched out to that larger broad brush so I can cover this canvas pretty quickly. And oh, look, I can do a lot better than this. And I'm not trying to do a flex here, but at the end of the day, I wanted to keep this loose and something that I believe that not so much a beginner, but at least a beginner or a novice could get their head around. I can paint this pretty much picture perfect, but honestly you wouldn't have the video for another 6 months because I am so slow at trying to get realism. But this kind of stuff is more fun for me, and also it's a matter of just to being able to get those videos out quick enough so that anybody that wants to take up acrylic painting has got that. They feel that they can at least have a go at something like this in an abstract style and possibly come out with a half decent result. Now here I'm going to paint a line straight down the side of his nose, which I will blend out later on in the video, but it's mainly just so I have a reference as to where to put those white highlights in later. And just like the background, again, I'm doing the same with his hair. I'm going to be tweaking it all the way through this painting where I'll be adding colour and then I'll take it away. And it's just a point where I'll just let the process take over and eventually I'll get to a point where I'm just happy with it. And also that's another point, do not overwork things. If you're quite happy with the way it looks, just step away from that area, start working on another area, and then if there is something that needs to be tweaked, believe me, you'll just see it. When you're right in that process, sometimes you get so caught up in that painting, that detail in that area, that you'll just overwork it and then you'll step back and think, oh, I've just spent 15-20 minutes on that and I don't even like the look of it. And just on that as well, sometimes you will make a change in a painting, especially an abstract, and you'll feel that you've wrecked it. You haven't wrecked it. All the thing is that you've just now made a change. Your brain's got used to the way it just looked, and now you've made a change. Give it another 15-20 minutes or step away from the painting and come back to that painting, and you'll think, oh, what was my problem? I haven't wrecked it at all. Now I'm starting to work on the lips. Here I'm going to add a little bit of crimson, and as you can see by the little saucer down there, I've got white, I've got some raw yellow ochre, I've got the crimson as I just said, and I'm just going to be building up those lips with colour. And blending as I go along. And there I've got my little filbert brush, which I've often talked about. I love the filbert. It's got a round edge, just a flat brush with a round edge, but it lets me be able to really sculpt those lips out nicely so that around his mouth I can get all those contours and also go to a line if I need to, or a nice round edge. And since I've still got a little crimson on my brush, I may as well use it in some other areas. Being the abstract that's quite acceptable. Now I'm going to start to work on that nose, paint in some nostrils, and then you'll see that I'll lighten them as we go throughout the painting, and it's just a matter of constantly tweaking and tweaking. Realism is a process. It will take quite a lot of practice for the newbie, but it is one of those things that you will just feel elated for once you start to conquer that feeling of being able to see an image and then from your brain transfer that down to your hand and paint that onto a canvas. It just feels awesome. using some straight lamp black and my round brush for detail, just for the eye line. I may have already mentioned this, but see how I like to cross-reference here with the points of the face? It just helps with my symmetry. Again, using the reference photo, you can see I'm just lining up that corner of the eye to the bottom of the mouth. See, I can tell you, mine looks a lot older. So my version is going to be the 30-year-old Paul Atreides, as opposed to the real version where he's supposed to be only 15. Okay, moving into the eye, you can see that I'm using a little yellow ochre with a little bit of that raw sienna again, there it goes, raw umber. And now I'm going to also use my detailed brush, or going to use my detailed brush. I do apologise for my very raw and broad Australian accent. I can't even say it. I should talk like this, Australian accent. And it wasn't raw umber. I just can't get the difference between the raw umber and the burnt umber. So this is burnt umber. I've got to burn that into my memory as I'm trying to do this narrative. Oh, my speaking's so bad. If I was trying to get every and ah out of my vocabulary while I'm trying to do this narrative, honestly, I wouldn't be able to do a video for 6 months. So I do apologise. It's just I'm not that great at speaking or getting my words from my brain out onto my mouth while I'm trying to watch myself paint at the same time. I guess I could be one of those real professionals and create a script, but hey, look, let's just do it. Let's just wing it. That's what most Australians do, or Aussies. Again, let's get back into the painting. Now I'm using my detail brush, which is just a round brush. I'm not sure what number is on that brush there, but they're usually a 1 or a 2 or maybe even a 0. The lesser the number, the more finer the point of your brush. Anyway, so this is a detailed brush, and I'm just painting between the yellow ochre, and there I've got a little bit of that burnt umber. Burnt umber? Yeah, I got it right. Burnt umber. Yay! And some lamp black for the darker points of his eyes and his pupils. Now, if you're still here, I'm absolutely amazed, but hopefully you are getting something out of this particular painting apart from my stumbling and comic relief. Now, there is also a little bit of a white going in there. Now that's a titanium white for the highlights of his eyes. Now when you're painting your eyes or any of the points where I'm doing his nose here, sometimes you do have to come back. As I said earlier, the white will not stay as white. It will dull once it dries. So just be mindful of that. You may have to go over those areas, and also always leave them to the last minute of your particular area. So if I'm painting that eye and I want to put in that white highlight, you really have to try and refrain right towards the end. That way it will really just make that eye pop out from the canvas, or even on the highlights of the nose. And you can see there I've just got some blue, some white, some lighter blue that I've mixed some white into just for the highlights of the hair. And here I'm just starting to really hit those, again, like I said earlier, hit those lighter points with that titanium white to make them stand out from the face. And here I felt it was still a little too clean cut, so I thought I might just add a little bit more detail or interest, not so much detail but interest, with a few splatters. Here I'm just mixing up a little bit of slurry from that raw umber, and now raw umber, there I go again, not raw umber, burnt umber, and then I'm going to use some white, and I even end up with a little bit of the crimson red, as you'll see shortly. Now you have to be careful adding too much water to your acrylic paint. It will break down the consistency of your paint, but in this case it doesn't really matter. But to be able to keep a really strong colour on your canvas, just try to add as much paint or pigment as you can to that water, if that makes sense. More paint to the water as opposed to water to the paint. It'll just stop it from going translucent once it hits the canvas. Once it dries, it'll just be see-through if you don't have enough pigment. And never be afraid to be able to just get in there and touch your painting. A lot of people say that they're so precious they don't want to get any of the oil from their hand onto the canvas, which is probably a good and valid point. But here I just like to get amongst it. I grab hold of it, manhandle it, and I've never had any complaints. Again, painting the sides to make sure that I make it look as if it's part of the front of the painting, so that if you're coming up alongside, the whole thing just seems to transition nicely. And now I'm back to the finger painting, and as you can see, I'm just grabbing a little bit of that white and just smudging that into the canvas. It does give for a really great effect, and also just seems to blend it nicely to that background. Oop, that didn't work out too well. Let's try that again. I'll just pull off those little spaces, and they stretch the canvas out, by the way. You can knock them in the little furrows at the back of your canvas. That way, if it does get a little loose over time, you can just put those little wedges in and it'll pull the canvas nice and tight. Well, I hope you got something out of today's tutorial, and I'll see you in the next one.